Hello, everybody, and welcome to Kayfabe with Keaton. Today, I'm bringing on a professional wrestling legend, someone who he was a journeyman through the WWF. He trained with the Sheik. He's had such an amazing career. He's estimate over 3,000 matches. A true legend in professional wrestling. Someone who I'm honored to bring on to Kayfabe with Keaton. This guy had the Irish gimmick, one of the best gimmicks in wrestling, and he was always willing to make someone else look good. He's wrestled legends like Andre the Giant, the Sheik, Don Morocco, some of the biggest names in wrestling, and has made it, and I was able to make them look like a star. So today, I'm pleased to welcome the legendary Irish Mickey Doyle.
Thanks, Keaton. Thanks for having me on your great show, brother. I'm honored, and we're going to have fun today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on. It was quite tough at the start here, but thankfully we were able to sort that out, and thankfully we were able to get you on.
Yeah, that was. I was wondering if we were going to make this work today, but it worked. We're here, folks.
Yep. So you've had such an incredible career. Obviously, you started off in wrestling with the Sheik, and I think it was called. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was called Big Time Wrestling. So tell me how you started off in wrestling.
Okay, I'll tell you right from the get-go. When I was a little, 10, 11 years old, they used to have wrestling on TV called Boston Bedlam, and it was WWF guys. And I was like intrigued by it. I just was fascinated. And so I kept watching wrestling. And then Detroit had two television shows in the late 50s and early 60s. And one was on Saturday afternoon, the other was on Thursday night, and the Thursday night show became the Sheik's promotion probably in the early 60s. So I just kept being intrigued, and later on I graduated from high school and I went into the military. When I got out of the military, there was a guy named Louis Klein who actually was part of a tag team who was part of the WWF Tag Team Champions, Red Bastien, and he changed his name to Lou Bastien, the Bastien brothers. And he had a wrestling school in a suburb, Allen Park of Detroit. And in 1970, I went there and I told him my story, and he said to me, "You should go to college." And I says, "I don't want to go to college. I want to try this in life. This is my passion." And he said, "Okay." And he charged me $300, and I think some wrestling schools now are probably outrageous prices, but $300. I trained for 6 months, and then I finally got a match in August of 1970 against Classy Freddie Blassie. That was my first match. It was a television match from the Sheik's promotion, and of course I got squashed. And I probably worked 3 or 4 months, but before I even got into the wrestling, I always worked out and tried to make myself look good, physically look good. And I had a decent body, and I could do aerial stuff, drop kicks, head scissors. So I did that when I could. When I was getting squashed, I'd still throw a drop kick. And probably 3 months into the business, the Sheik said, he was the promoter. He owned the promotion in Detroit. He said, "Kid, you want to go on the road full time?" And I said, "Of course." So I started my first full-time career January of 1971, and in his promotion, we worked every night. We'd have a rare day off, which was great. That's how I learned. And I wrestled in that promotion for a year. And then that promotion was like a punch and kick promotion. That was what that was. It was a lot of the old timers from the golden age of wrestling, like, the Sheik, obviously, but Bobo Brazil, Pampero Firpo, just trying to think of names people would know. There was a lot of local guys, Ben Justice, the Stomper guy, Mitchell, Dingo the Sundowner would come into the promotion, Blackjack Mulligan. It was a big promotion. They'd run 2 towns a night. So after a year, they sent me to Tampa, which was a promotion of wrestling. They had Jack Briscoe and they had Johnny Walker. I mean, some shooters, Ronnie Garvin. It was a promotion where you could learn. And every Tuesday you could go to what was called the Sportatorium, which you actually did TV tapings once a week there also. But the guy named Hiro Matsuda, who was a legend in pro wrestling, he would work with me. He would work with anybody that showed up, and he would work with me, and that helped me learn some really nice, cool finesse moves. So I worked in Tampa which was a really proving ground for me, a great learning experience for probably half a year, 8 months. And they had, like you said, names of wrestling that worked there. It was, I'm just trying to think, like I said, Ronnie Garvin, and Walker and Jack Briscoe. Who else? Ole Anderson was there. Bobby Duncombe. I could list a whole bunch of guys, but then they sent me. Okay, there was a guy that had just left Tampa to go work in the Mobile promotion, and his name was Mike Boyette, and we looked alike. We looked really alike. We had the same goofy hair, and they sent me there, and they teamed us right up, and we became the California Hippies. And we had like 2 to 3 years of success. We had like the Kansas. We worked in Mobile for a year. Then the Kansas City office, who was owned by Harley Race, Pat O'Connor, and Bob Geigel, they called and said, "You guys, we want you. Come in. We'll give you the belts." So we went and worked there. Then where else? Memphis called us. Montgomery called us. We went to a lot of places, and we did really well. We made some decent money. I mean, we made better than an average living. It was decent money. But what happened was my partner had a wife and 2 kids in Mobile, and he would always leave to go home because he missed his wife and kids. So I would get stranded alone, and I'd always go back to Mobile. So that's how that worked. But that was cool. That was my most funnest times. I lived in Pensacola, Florida, which was great, right on the ocean, and that was a great time. And then, and Mobile had a lot of the Southern guys too. A lot of the Tampa guys worked there. Bobby Shane, that was another one who got killed in a plane crash. He worked Tampa, but he also would come into Mobile and work. Where else? Then, like I said, Kansas with Harley Race, and I got to team with Harley Race a few times. That was really cool. That was really, really cool. That was neat, a legend like that. So I worked there. Then back in Mobile, Hippie got a call from Los Angeles Hollywood Wrestling office to go work out there. They wanted us to do a Hippie gimmick out there, but he went out first. And for some reason, Mike could talk on the mic. He was a great interview. I mean, he was unbelievable. He was a decent enough worker, but I mean, did all the high spots and everything because we worked heel and babyface depending on where we were. But for some reason, he didn't get over in the ring. He got over on the mic, which usually they like that. So I came out there. But in the meantime, to cover my ass, I got booked in Portland also, just in case that didn't work up. So I was double booked at the time. So I went to LA, and I could see Mike wasn't going to stay again. So I just told John Tolis and who else? A guy named Mr. Moto were the bookers. There was someone else too. But I told John, I just met him. I said, I'm going to go to Portland and see what happens. So I went to Portland and stayed about a year. And out of Portland, I got booked in Japan, and then I got booked in Hawaii. And what happened then? Came home from Hawaii. Then my first marriage went to hell in a handbag because I was never home, and I understand that. But the problem was my first wife left me and our 2-year-old son, Brett. So, I mean, I was a single parent just like that. So what I did from Hawaii, I worked in San Francisco for Roy Shires, which was cool because he paid off the boys good. He was kind of a weird guy to work for, but he paid off good. And I stayed there, but I mean, my wife had my son actually at the time in Los Angeles with my mother-in-law. So I'm really going into detail, aren't I?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So I went back to LA. I'm giving you my whole career in a thumbnail. I went back to LA and I basically took my son. And my first wife just booked. She went out to the desert and lived in Needles, California, which is about 90 miles from Las Vegas. And I got my son. I got custody of him. He was still only 2 years old. And I was wrestling part-time. And I got a job. I had to get a job because when you're a wrestler, as you know, you're an independent contractor. You have no insurance or anything. You're strictly on your own. So I got a job, which I was so fortunate, in the post office in Burbank, California, working on the docks, unloading trucks and everything. And then I was wrestling part-time, doing that full-time, making a decent living and getting benefits, healthcare. And that's what I did from 1980 to I worked the wrestling. My last wrestling show was 3 years ago. So I worked all that time up to, I didn't wrestle full-time, obviously. I mean, I did rare matches when I turned in my 60s. I did a rare match. But I mean, I did that, and then I finally retired from the post office. But in the meantime, I came back to Detroit, which is where I was born, in 1984, and I started working again part-time, and I had my post office job, and I teamed up with a guy named Al Costello, and we were the last version of the Fabulous Kangaroos. So I did that part-time, and Al and I were partners for a couple of years, and then I met a young guy named Al Snow, who, Snow did real well, and we became the Motor City Hitmen. And we did that, and we had people flying us here and there, which was cool, getting a decent payoff. And then Al got a breakdown in Smoky Mountain for Cornette, and his career took off. And he's actually owns the Ohio Valley Wrestling in Louisville right now. But anyway, in the meantime, around the early 90s, I get a phone call from this kid in Canada, and he says, my name is Scott Demore, and I've got a wrestling ring, and I was wondering if you come over and maybe work with some of my friends, and we want to be wrestlers. My wife's just coming in with our dog, so it's going to get hectic for a second. It's okay. So Scott Demore called me, so I went over to Windsor to where he told me to come, and he had a real nice wrestling ring in this old shabby building. And, we got in the ring, and we did some things, and he had been working a little bit. He was only 16 at the time. This would have been I think this was 1993. And we became buddies, and Scott and I are to this day. But, Scott had a great career, became the CEO for the, Impact or TNA, whatever it is now. And then a real quick side note, Scott, they let him go about a year ago, but he still had 6 months on his contract, so he was pulling in a boatload of money for 6 months sitting at home, which was really, it's a nice gig if you can get it, right?
Absolutely.
But he's got a promotion now called Maple Leaf Wrestling over in Windsor, and he just uses Canadian kids, and he runs the shows here and there. But he's doing, and actually he just got together with, I think, what's the one in Mexico? Is it CMLL or something like that? Yeah, and he's doing they're swapping talent and so forth. And so I'll tell you, the people that I stay close to in the business, I talk to Don Morocco. We talk once a week religiously. And actually he did a show this weekend in New York. Supposedly it's be Don Morocco's last appearance, and it's kind of funny. And he said it's going to be my last appearance because he doesn't like to fly. But in the meantime, his daughter just posted something to me where his whole house is flooded. They live on Sunset Beach, and this whole bottom of his house is flooded. And I'm sure he knows it, but I mean, he's coming home to a mess. Little side note there. But anyway, I talked to Morocco. We always talk. Scott and I, we go to ball games in Detroit, and Al Snow and I don't talk as much as we used to. And once in a while, Tom Pritchard and I, because Tom and I became friends when he first broke in. He came to L.A. for his first real territory from Texas. So we talk sporadically. But, I mean, I talk to Morocco and Demore all the time, and, we're buddies. And actually, Morocco and I had a podcast about 4 years ago called Making Waves, which was a lot of fun. We did that for about 6 years, but the guy that was hosting it, we all kind of turned on each other. I mean, the guy kind of turned on Morocco and me for some goofy reasons. So, but that was fun. We had a blast every Thursday doing that. But that's kind of, touching on my whole career in a way there is what I just did.
Yeah, that's awesome. You can tell you found such an amazing career. So what I was going to do there was, obviously you gave me a great overview of your career, but to dive into it a bit more, I want to ask you, when you started wrestling with the Sheik, when you first got into training, what was the first thing you learned from the Sheik?
Okay, well, he didn't train me. The Sheik didn't train me. Louis Klein trained me, and actually a guy that trained me every night was a guy named Bobby Blaine, who was a journeyman wrestler. But he's the guy that got in the ring with me every night. And also Louis Klein had a daughter named Linda Klein, who was the girl wrestler. She would get in the ring with me too, not every night, but Louis's wrestling school was actually a converted building that he actually lived in also. He had a little tiny room up front, and he lived there. And actually I ended up living there too for a while when I got on the business full time. I actually lived in the back too there. He had a whole thing going, but the ring was right there. And it was a lousy ring. It was just some 2x4s on the floor, elevated about 6 inches. And he had some hoses around, as the ropes. And there was a big pop machine in one corner. If you hit the rope, sometimes you would hit your elbow on it. But that was where I learned. But it served a purpose. But that's where I trained for, like I said, 6 months. And then the Sheik, like I said, the Sheik liked my work. And actually, I did a big big blade job for him on TV one time. And that was my first blood match that he used his famous pencil on my head, his famous pencil that he always kept in his boot. But I mean, I like the Sheik. I got along with the Sheik real well. And, he was not a good payoff man, but he was a fun guy to be around, actually. I mean, he was all business, obviously, but he never overpaid anybody. The only time he started paying good is when a guy named Killer Brooks, Tony Marino, and the booker at the time named Jack Kane went opposition to him because they were pissed off about the payoffs too. So they went opposition to him. And that was, when was that? I don't even remember the year, but he went opposition. Then the Sheik started paying everybody that stayed with him good money. Yeah. We were getting instead of $40 payoff for Cincinnati, he'd pay us $100, which he could have been paying us all along. But then the payoffs got good. But I like the Sheik, but he never overpaid anybody. And like I said, then they sent me to Tampa for Eddie Graham. He was the owner and promoter of that promotion, and back in the day. Did I answer that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So a lot of times, like when you start wrestling, a lot of people say that when you take your first bump, that's kind of like when you decide if it's for you or not for you.
Oh yeah.
When you first took that bump, how did it feel?
I'm going to be honest with you. I used to go to wrestling when I was in high school at Cobo Hall in Detroit. That was the big wrestling venue, and it seated about 14,000 people. Every time after coming home from Cobo Hall, I had a mattress in the basement. I'd go and I just take bumps in my basement. That was my first bumps on this old mattress. I just run and do a somersault and like a Beal at home. But the first bump on a Louis Klein ring, hell, that's the first thing I wanted to do is have people Beal me and throw me around, throw me over the top ropes and everything. Not at his gym, you couldn't do that. But when I first got in the business in a real wrestling ring, that was cool. I remember one time actually at Louis' gym, he actually set up outside of his building in the summer a real wrestling ring. That's when I got into a real wrestling ring. Probably, let me think, probably 4 months into the training, he put up a real ring. And that's when I started, throw me out of the ring, throw me over the top rope. That's what I used to like to take crazy bumps if I could. And that's it. Now I've had 14 surgeries, so I guess I paid a price for that. But the first bump, I knew that was for me anyway. The first training, the first thing they trained me is get into the ring, wipe your feet off, then get into the ring. And the lockup, you circle, you get closer, then the collar to elbow. That's the first thing I think that's what we worked on the whole first practice was just the lockup, and that was it. Just maybe an hour and a half of that, and then maybe he taught me. I think he taught me a headlock and a headlock takeover. He taught me that everything's left-handed. But you guys in Europe, you're like I don't know. You guys do right-handed too, right? Both, right?
Yeah. So even when I first started wrestling, the first thing we learned was obviously the lockup, like you said, and the rolls, but we're also learned obviously the lanes. Always to go to the right. That's what we always do, the right side of things. Yeah,
that's when I learned to work on the right side is when I went to California, and a guy named Al Madrill he wanted to do lucha libre spots, and I said I was game for anything, but he would do right-handed stuff. So I learned to take right-handed arm drags, and it was weird. It was awkward, but I still adapted to it. But that's when I learned the right-handed. Yeah, but that's cool that you guys. It's neat to see that. I mean, I enjoy all forms of it. Just all forms. And I still watch the wrestling on TV, not religiously, but I still watch it. And you got video of you on your career? Do you have video out there that I could see, like YouTube or something?
Yeah, once the show's done, I'll send you a link. I've had a few matches. I've had three. I'm coming into my fourth one soon. But yeah, I've had a good few matches.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that. We got to stay in touch, on a personal level too. This is cool. Yeah, maybe I can throw you some pointers. Who the hell knows,
Yeah, that'd be great to hear some of your advice. Yeah, but when you first started, having matches and things like that, what was it that when you went into the ring, and how did you get your heat, or else getting over? If you were a heel, obviously you would get your heat. If you're a face, you would get over. So what did you do in your first kind of matches what did you learn to get over?
Okay, are we talking like if I'm babyface or heel?
Well, whenever more babyface.
Okay, I was babyface when I first broke in. Obviously, I was a babyface I worked babyface for, probably 3 or 4 years before I even was a heel. So babyface, I just learned to sell, that's why I say, throw me over the top rope and I'll sell like I'm dying, and then maybe get up on the apron and try to come back in the ring, and the heel, nails me again, and I'll bump. And then finally I'll, get mad, start pulling my hair up and running around and, jump back up on the apron and maybe, do that deal where the heel comes over and you throw your shoulder, from the top and middle rope, you throw your shoulder into his stomach, and maybe you sunset flip him over the top rope type deal, something like that. And maybe he kicks out of I'm just hypothetically, he kicks out of the sunset flip. And, I start stalking them and that sort of thing, that sort of thing. To get over, I'd sell. That was what I would do, and make good facials, and if you can get, like, I'm going to use myself. If you can get the crowd going, like, go Mickey, go. That was, that's for real. You feel that. You know that. You feel that when the people's yelling your name, either heel or babyface. I mean, it gives you adrenaline. It's a real thing. People say about, people have their doubts about pro wrestling, but it's a real thing, other than, there's some scripted things, but shit, the bumps are real, the tables are real, the chairs are real, the blood's real. People don't understand that, the naysayers. That's what's so. Let me tell you a quick story. What happened one time? All right, this is wrestling related. So I'm working out at this gym in Detroit, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to just say I bled that night before, and I got a butterfly on my forehead, and this guy comes up to me, and he knew I was a wrestler, and he goes, oh, I thought all that shit was fake. And I just went off on him verbally, and I really did. And then I just walked away. So maybe a half hour later, I see the EMTs coming into the gym, and they're putting this guy on the thing, and the guy had a heart attack. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So I just always tried to do a low profile on being a wrestler, because I didn't want to get, I kind of think I may have helped to have that happen. You know what I mean? So as far as, that's why I said about the blood. So anyway, what the hell was I saying now? I'm sorry, I get all carried away here. We were talking about comebacks in the ring, and I got off on bleeding, and I don't even know how I did that. Do you? Anyway, like I said, I would make facials to get the crowd in my behalf to cheer me on, and that's what I would do. Try to, like, a lot of oohs and ahs and oh, and staggering and just trying to take a crazy dangerous bump. That's what I would do as a babyface. And then when I made a comeback, I'd really fire on the guy. And I was left-handed, and I could throw good jabs. I could throw a really good right-handed jab, and I could pop it really good, and you couldn't even see me doing that. And I threw a good left hand later on in life, later on in my career. Not starting out, they sucked. But when I first figured it out, I could throw good punches. So I do that, and maybe the drop kick and whatever. At the beginning, though, of a babyface match, do a little reverses, whatever, with the heel, if it was a heel that can take bumps, and then maybe do a cool high spot, and then, cut me off, and then I'll sell and make the comeback, and then whoever's going over, if I'm going over, I'll make a big comeback and go home on the comeback, and if he's beating me, then maybe I'll make the comeback, he cuts me off with some devastating move, and then just beats me. that's kind of the formula for that. And when we first started in the business, the heel always called the match. And I see kids now, I don't know, you probably might do it yourself, but they'll talk a half hour about what they're going to do in their match. We never did that. We call the finish, and if we had a big high spot, we'll say, okay, we're going to do this spot, blah, blah, blah. But usually the heel just called the match, called the spots. That's how it worked back in the day. And I don't know how it works for you guys now. If you do talk it over for a half hour or somebody call.
Yeah, so before, normally nowadays, in my last match, it was this guy's first match, so I sort of carried him through it.
Yeah.
He learning what he was doing. But we just decided, nowadays, like what I would do is I wouldn't plan every single move, but I would plan the kind of story of it. So in my last match, for me to get my me to go over, or me to lose this match. So at the start, I locked up but done all my chain wrestling because I'm a face. So obviously for me to get over as a face, I need to do that kind of thing. So obviously I was the better wrestler. That was the whole point of it. So then he cut me off by offering me a handshake and dragging me into a headlock. So then he's obviously cheating to get his heat, and he uses dirty tactics to win. So that's sort of the way I would get over as a heel. But yeah, we mostly just plan out what the kind of things that we're going to do in the match, but wouldn't plan out the move, every single move, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
that's what a lot of kids do now. They'll plan every single move, and it's like, I don't know how you could remember that, but they do it. I guess they do it. It's a whole different style now than when we started. We did, obviously, if you watch old 50s matches and 60s, it's a whole different storyline. But it's these kids now, you guys now are all great athletes, and I nothing but respect. But it's a whole different ball game, yeah. But it's a whole different thing on the payoffs too. Now guys are, these guys on. Demore told me that anybody on TV now, like even the road agents, like Petey Williams is one of the kids. I didn't even tell you that we started a wrestling school. Demore and I had a wrestling school. Did I tell you that? It's still going. It's called Can-Am Wrestling, and we trained Rhino, and Petey Williams came out of there, and Shelley and Sabin came out of there. Who else came out of there? A lot of people. Pardon?
When you say Sabin, Chris Sabin?
Who'd you say?
You said Sabin, someone who was it Chris Sabin?
Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley. They came out of there. Like I said, Petey Williams is a road agent now for New York. But who else? Like Rhino was our first student that did really well. Johnny Bravo, who's on TV with TNA, he was one of our kids. There's a lot more too. I just can't think of everybody. But yeah, a lot of kids that are in that school is still going to this day over in Windsor. Yeah, he's still running it. But anyway, I got sidetracked there. I had forgot to tell you that we had the wrestling school too. But yeah, then like when we go heel, see, I loved working heel, and I think we talked about that off air. Working heel was a blast because you can take them crazy bumps when the baby face making your comeback, his comeback, and but the thing is, like I said earlier, you get in the ring. And you find somebody I would do this anyway. I would find somebody that's really going to screw with me. They're already giving me the business before even the match starts. So I'll get with that person, either a man or woman, and just go with them, and try to be kind of insulting to them, not crudely, but kind of insulting. So they give me hell the whole match, and that's what I would do. And that's what Al Snow, he always gave me credit. He says, I learned a lot teaming with Mickey, and I'm not blowing smoke right now, but he said that, and because he did learn a lot from me, and he would always do that, pick out somebody in the crowd. But he was really funny though. Snow was a lot funnier than I. He would do comedy stuff, even when he was healing. He would pick out somebody, and he was hilarious what he would do with fans. He was really good with that. Yeah. But healing, you get in there. And depending on who you're working with, if you're working with a baby face that can really do some cool stuff, you just call all the spots to make him look good, that he's good with. That's what I would do when I was healing. And like I said, screw with somebody in the crowd, call some spots, and then when he's making his comeback, you sell like a maniac for him and go all over. And then, what did you use for a finish? What was your finisher?
So I lost the last match, but my main move that I would normally do is a DDT.
A DDT, yeah. So what's cool? Remember Van Damme? How he used to take the DDT? Oh my God, it was amazing, wasn't it? Like a headstand, and just it seemed like he was up on his head for a couple seconds before he took the bump. That was amazing. Yeah, if you can get a guy to take a bump for you like that, it really gets it over, don't it?
Yeah, the most I do is a front bump DDT. Never mind the way he used to do it.
You took like a face plant DDT.
Yeah,
Some guys
never
take
mind
a good.
handstanding.
Yeah, some guys take a good face plant DDT too. Yeah, it's cool. You can take a couple bumps. You're right off of that. Yeah, but I don't know. I get sidetracked here. I'm sorry. We were talking about. Oh yeah. My that was my logic for healing is pick somebody out and take bumps for them. Get the heat. Try to do some cool a false finish here and there. Like false finish, get the heat, then have a good finisher for either as a heel or a baby face. So your DDT is when you're healing or baby and you use the same move, right?
Yep.
It don't matter. Yeah, okay. I got you. I was just going to say, who did you train with over there in Belfast?
I don't know if you would know him, but I've trained with a guy called Nathan Hoy. He wrestles as Nate Maddox. Would you know?
I honestly don't, but I'll Google him today too. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I've also trained with some of the UK guys as well. You probably know Marty Jones from the World of Sport Wrestling.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Marty Jones out of England, right? In England. Yeah. Yeah, that's a guy to train with there. I used to up in Portland. There was a kid he was an Irish kid named Sean O'Regan. Do you remember that name? Or not really? Yeah, okay. He was an Irish guy, obviously, Sean O'Regan, but we had some great matches. They would he was working in Vancouver at the time, but they would bring him back to work with me because we had such good matches. We do 30-minute Broadways and just, and nobody was a heel. We both just wrestled real rugged, That was fun working with him. Yeah, Sean O'Regan. I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was a blast to work with.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a bit about. You mentioned they're training with Al Snow. Obviously, there's a lot that I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there's a lot that's came out about OVW right now. It's okay if you don't want to answer this, but have you seen the thing about the referee in OVW?
I did, and then they didn't even attend to him. He was just laying there, right?
Yeah. What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's bullshit. Cut and dry. That is because what are you doing? You're not thinking. You're not. There's 3 men in the ring. The refs is just as important, and the guy's working, and you stop the match and attend to the screw all of the match, and it doesn't matter. They screwed up, and I didn't realize that was for Al's promotion. That was OVW, eh?
Yeah, that was OVW.
Well, I'm sure he gave those guys hell big time. I'm sure he did. I can't even imagine what. Is that kid all right?
Yeah, I think he's okay. I haven't seen much about it lately, but I hope he's okay. And yeah, Al Snow put up a post about it. He wasn't happy at all. So thankfully, Al Snow dealt with it well.
Did he? I didn't see Al's post. Did he post something? I'm sure he posted something decent. Obviously, Al's a decent person. Yeah. Wow, that could be a lawsuit. Actually, I mean, that's possible. I don't know. I don't know how that'll work. As long as the guy's all right, though, that's the bottom line. Yeah, I don't understand that. Why? I've seen you've seen crazy videos, right, of pro wrestling, like backyard, like guys wrestling, and it's crazy stuff. I mean, crazy stuff, just crazy gimmicks in it, like, all the glass and all that stuff. Where was I going with this? I just start talking and I lose my track. I was going somewhere with this. I guess my reason was why on those things, like why would they do that? They're not going to get booked doing that, I mean, I've done barbed wire matches and all that, which was fun. I mean, I enjoyed doing that, truthfully, but not, light bulb. What are those guys do? Those fluorescent lamp deals, fluorescent lights where they all explode, and I don't, it is what it is. It's part of wrestling, and but I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it, I would say.
Neither am I. I think that I do think there's a time for it. Like, I don't think light bulbs will ever be a good idea, or light tubes, but hardcore wrestling sometimes can be good. If it has a story, I think it should be a one-time occasion, not something a promotion should do every single match. It should be a one-time occasion to maybe match a grudge feud or a feud between someone that can go into a hardcore match. But doing this every single week, it's not going to last very long, especially for the other person with light tubes going up ahead, exploding barbed wire. Just not wrestling.
It's over. Yeah, it's overkill, right? It gets. It's like I remember when WCW first brought in some of the luchadors, and it was like cool. It was really cool seeing this different style. But now, you know what drives me nuts now? Super kicks. Everybody does a super. They don't mean nothing anymore. The Usos do. What do they do? Maybe at least 10 super kicks a match. It's like that used to be a devastating move. That was a cool move, but now it doesn't mean nothing.
The thing the thing is, even with my show being named Kayfabe with Keaton, obviously I know that like Kayfabe is maybe isn't as prominent as it maybe would have been in your day, but I do believe that for someone watching wrestling, even if they do know that it's scripted, it should still look realistic. If someone's getting kicked in the head or kicked in the neck like a super kick, they're in a real fight, they're automatically going to be knocked down. So people kicking out of everything, people are going to get bored of that, and obviously that wouldn't work in a real fight. So I think wrestling should look realistic as well. And with the Usos, even with the WrestleMania match, there was about 200 super kicks in the WrestleMania match. That just would not work in real life.
No, it wouldn't work in real life. You got to have some reality in there. You're right. Like I said, the Usos. I mean, Jesus, it don't mean nothing. Oh God, I had a good one for you, and I just lost track again. Anyway, it'll come back eventually. Maybe it might come back tomorrow, and I'll text you. But yeah, the super kicks. Oh, I know. I think I know what I was going to go with. Back in the old days, like a suplex, that was a finish. That's a stretcher job, maybe. When a guy did you a suplex, a big time suplex, that a lot of times you get carried on a stretcher, yeah. But now that doesn't. That's nothing. A suplex is nothing. That might start a match out, right? It doesn't mean anything anymore. And but that's just. I don't even know what finishes are now. Oh, kids do them. What's that one that Petey Williams used to do? That. It was a cool move. It's like a sunset flip, but it's the Canadian Destroyer.
Yeah. It's also recognized as the Powerbomb as well. There's two names for it.
Yeah, that's a great move. But you know who the Canadian Destroyer was? Was Scott D'Amore's first trainer. That's a real person over in Windsor at our wrestling school. That was an actual guy wrestler, and I can't think of his real name now. And he was my friend. He died, but I can't even think of his name. That's what happens when you get really old. But I mean, he invented the Canadian Destroyer, and then it's been that name ever since. And somebody on TV, when it's done, should say who that guy was. You know, they should tell the background of who the Canadian Destroyer. But I've never heard anybody do that. But that's a shame because he was a good guy, not a great worker, but he had that finish was great. Anyway.
Yeah, awesome. And even with you mentioned there are some things that you could criticize in wrestling. Some of the super kicks, maybe they're kicking out of too much stuff, especially the hardcore wrestling. But with you saying that you watch maybe WWE sometimes, obviously that's the biggest product. What's your opinion on professional wrestling now with the likes of WWE and what they're doing with wrestling?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll watch a Monday Night Raw, and there's so many scripted interviews. They're not from the heart interviews. You can tell that, especially when the girls do interviews. A lot of them just are not real good. Couple of them are, but a lot of them, like Flair's daughter is a good interview. She can talk really good and believable, but some of them you can tell it's just a writer said it for her. And that's what D'Amore told me when that girl Naomi came and worked for him. I guess WWF let her go for a while, and she came and worked for them. And he told them, just go out and do your interview. And she said, I don't know how. She didn't know how to do an interview. It had to be scripted for her. That's a true story. Yeah, she didn't know how to do an interview. And he said, damn. So he helped her cut a promo because she had no idea how to do a real promo. Yeah, but back in the day, Dusty Rhodes. I mean, obviously, he was a riot to watch, wasn't he? And that was just from the heart. Those interviews were so clever. And like Piper was a good interview. Morocco was a good interview. I got one of my crazy dogs got to go outside. Hold on, buddy. Hold on. No, I got it, Debbie. Go on, buddy. Bear. Go get him, Big Bear. All right, we're back. What were we talking about? Kicking out of things, kicking out of finishes? That's what we were just talking about? Okay. No, we're okay, Deb. Thanks. My wife said, do we need more daylight? I look all right, don't I? I mean, as far as
fine.
Everything's fine. Yeah, kicking out of That's what it was. I was trying to think of the finishes these guys do now, and that Canadian Destroyer is a believable finish. But I'm trying to think. Well, Seth Rollins does that deal where he jumps on your head deal, and I mean that's pretty convincing. I mean, I don't think anybody kicks out of that, do they? That's always a knockout, isn't it? Usually,
I think there's only been maybe one or two people that's kicked out of it. So yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a. I mean, it's not a wrestling finish, but it's pretty good finish. I watched some of that AEW or highlights about it the other day, and this kid was using a syringe on a guy's face. Did you see that?
I don't really watch AEW. I don't think AEW is very good wrestling, so I haven't watched it in about 5 months, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I don't even know the players on there. Some guy named, he's got initials he uses. Like I don't even know, but what was it?
MJF?
Yep, that's it. And he was in this match, and he was dressed up like how Terry Funk used to wear them wild tights. He was dressed up like Terry Funk or something. He don't look like Terry Funk because he's not a real big guy, but and they were doing all this juice, and then he pulls out a syringe and sticks it in the guy's cheek, and I'm thinking, damn, that's hardcore. But I didn't get it. But I didn't see the match. I just saw some highlights that was on the internet. So I don't know what the storyline was at, but he had a damn big old needle sticking in a guy's cheek. And I was like, damn. He stuck it right in there and it came out the mouth. It's like, wow. you know?
Yeah.
I don't know what the purpose of that was. Yeah, I don't think you're missing nothing. It just was what it was. But I don't watch that too much either. But I mean, they had been on TV now, I would say at least 4 years or so, maybe 5 years, it seems like. So, and that guy pays good money. I've heard he pays the boys, his dad's a billionaire, so whatever. But he takes care of the boys. So, I mean, shit, I guess you do what you do to make that money, right?
Absolutely. And Tony Khan, the guy who owns it, he's very good. He's a big wrestling fan himself, and they have a really good roster there. But I'm not the biggest fan of AEW just because of that. I like MJF. I think MJF, the guy who done that, is a really, really good wrestler. But I just don't really see the point in that hardcore stuff.
Yeah, that was hardcore. That stuff they was doing that night. Yeah, what I saw anyway. Yeah, but whatever. That's what they want. And if he's paying these guys $1 million, I mean, shit, I'd probably do. I know I'd do it. I'm getting $1 million contract. They can stick the thing in my cheek. I don't give a damn. But
yeah, and kind of back to what we were talking about there about your career and your wrestling career, and we kind of got lost there with talking about our opinions on wrestling. So
everything. Everything.
When you were talking about working for the Sheik and working for bigger names, once you finally learned how to bump and things like that, you got onto the WWF, and obviously you were quite trained at that time. But when you worked for the WWF and you went over, you lost to a lot of different guys, making them look good. What was the point where you got on?
Say that again. What was the point of what?
Like where you got on to the WWF?
Oh, well, I never was contracted. Let me think. The first time I worked for WWF, it was WWF in 1970. They sent me and a guy named Killer Brooks and a couple of two other kids to do TV tapes in Philadelphia and then in another town in Hamburg. And we did 6 matches in 2 days. And they paid $50 a match. So that was pretty cool, actually. That was like I came home with maybe $500 after everything was said and done. And they paid our hotels and, but I worked, who I worked with? I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, but he was one of the all-times, Carl Gotch. Did you ever hear of Carl Gotch?
Yeah, I've heard of the name.
He was one of the Luthez and Carl Gotch, and they were that type of guy. But I got to work with him, and he was putting me in holds to make me look good. We did about a 6-minute match, and babyface, and he liked the way I looked, and he says, "Okay, we're gonna have a nice little match there, Sonny." And he would put me in a hold where I had a hold in him, and I don't even know how he did it. He did some sort of a move. It was really cool, and then he'd beat me with some really cool technical move. But that was fun. And then I worked with, oh gosh, you probably never even heard of these guys: Crazy Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler, Stan Stasiak. Yeah. Okay. Then I worked with Freddie Blassie. Oh, there's a cool story. So I worked the second night, I remember my first match in the TV taping was with Freddie Blassie, who I had my first match with. And he was working a program with the guy that had the belt at the time, was Pedro Morales. And I get in the ring, and before Fred's out there, the ref comes over to me and says, Freddie just wanted to tell you he's got to guzzle you real quick because he's working with Pedro in the Gardens, in Madison Square Gardens in 2 weeks. So I said, damn, no problem. I'll tell him to throw me around like a rag doll. And we get in the ring and he locks up and he goes, I remember you, kid. You were my first match, right? And then he commenced to beat me. But that was cool. I mean, that was classy Freddie Blassie. That was cool. But those. And then later on when I lived in California, anytime they'd come to town, I'd always work for them. They had about 4 guys that would always work for them. Me, a guy named Tony Rocco, who was a great worker from Spain. Who else? A guy named Jack Armstrong. And John Tolis at the time was already kind of out of the business, and BS4, we'd always work for them. We'd work the opening bouts, second and third bouts. And you know what they did actually when they first came to town in 1984? I remember. This is crazy. We used to work at a building called the Olympic Auditorium, which is a famous building in Los Angeles, famous boxing. A lot of the boxing movies were filmed there. A lot of history in the Olympics. Anyway, I had been working there for 10 years. And when I first went into that promotion in 1975, excuse me, we had television on NBC, which is one of the big affiliates, for 4 weeks, and then they lost their television that they had for years, and it went on to just the Spanish channel, the Lucha Libre channel. So the audiences dwindled because they didn't have TV anymore. But here's what I'm getting to on this. And we, in them 10 years I was working, I'd go everywhere. This is when I got the part-time job. I mean, I was part-time wrestler starting in 80, but when I first went in there in 75 was when we lost television, and then I would go on the road. But all the time I was in Los Angeles, I would always go either to Portland to work or San Francisco to work, or when I go to Japan or Hawaii. But I would, back and forth. But then from 80 on till I would move back to Detroit, I'll get to the point of this in a minute. I was working part-time. Long story short, what I'm saying is we didn't have good audiences after we lost TV. So in 1984, WWF came in there to work their big show at the Olympic on a Saturday night. So I'm driving to the arena, and I'm looking, and I see these crowds lined up around the building, and I knew they had a rock and roll revival show coming in with Chuck Berry and Little Richard, all the greats from the rock and roll history. And I'm thinking, okay, they're lining up to get tickets. And I pulled into the parking area, and I'm thinking, they're here for this tonight. It was, I walked into that arena, and I swear to God, it was when it's time for the first match, which was me and Tony Rocco. It was people standing room only. I'd never seen it like that in the Olympic. There must have been 12,000 people there. It was so cool. And I was on, like I said, the first match, and they had you in the dressing area in the Olympic is like a dungeon. It's underground. You go down these stairs, and it's like you had to see it to believe it. It's like prehistoric, that arena. It was just so cool. So I walking up, and you got to walk from the dressing room out, and then you walk down this long, it's about 40 yards to the ring, and it's down a step, what would you call it, a steep area. And I had 3 cops on each side, and I was on such a buzz from this crowd. I felt like I was floating to the ring. I literally felt like it was an out-of-body experience. And Tony and I had the best match of the night. We did everything. It wasn't a heel or babyface match. We worked just rugged babyface type match. And we did every spots we could think of. It was so cool. We did a 20-minute Broadway. And I mean, we walked out of the ring, people were just, cheering for us. It was such a good match. Long story short, I don't know how I got talking about this, but that was the first time. That was the WWF. Yeah. Then they drew such a good crowd. They started coming in every 2 weeks then. And, I'd work for them every 2 weeks, and it was cool till I moved. At the time then I was a single parent, and I came back to Detroit because I've got a lot of brothers and sisters, and they helped me with my son raising them. So that's why I moved out of LA, but I wouldn't mind being in California. It was such a groovy place to live. But, they would call, I'd go work. They would usually run on a Friday night in Oakland. and then Saturday Olympic, and then Sunday maybe San Diego. So, and the thing is, Pat Patterson was making the payoffs, right?
Yeah.
And he would always give you at least $400 to $500 every night working. I was working, I had my job and I'm making that. It was great while that lasted. It was great. Just quick, nice, good money, more than I was making a week at the post office. So, I mean, I was, digging that, but that was my career for them. I was never contracted on the road with them or anything like that. I just, did the TV jobs, and then in LA for a bit when they'd come into town while they did. And then the crowd started to diminish again, It wasn't 10,000 again. It was maybe they'd draw 4,000. So, yeah, it just the novelty of wrestling coming, because Andre was on that first card in '84, and they had the Battle Royal. Actually, was the first. That '84 was the battle. The Olympic used to run a Battle Royal once a year, and that always did draw good. Andre was usually involved in it, so that that kicked it in. But that first night in '84, they had all their boys there too. They had the Hulkster was there, and David Schultz, Dr. Schultz, and actually worked with him one of the matches at the Olympic, later on into the months. He was a good guy to work with. I didn't have no problem with him. We had a good match. He did some spots with me, and then he beat me with some elbow off the top rope deal. That was fine. But they had all their boys in at the time, Tony Atlas and Putski and that whole crew. So they drew that. That was fun that night. Did I get off track? I don't even remember.
No,
I'm rambling.
Yeah, no. What I asked you didn't answer, to be honest. But when you mentioned there, you started working for the WWF.
Yeah.
The WWF. Did you have any experiences of working with Vince McMahon, senior or junior?
I met him that night in the Olympic. Actually, I met him. We talked for a minute. So, but fast forward now to the year 2000. So I had vacation time, and Al Snow called me up and goes, "You want to go on the road with me for a week?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "What towns are we doing?" And he goes, "Well, we're going to do." What did we do? We did Pittsburgh, Pensacola, and a couple somewhere in Carolinas and somewhere in Alabama. We did 4 shows, and I talked to Vince at TV. What TV was it? It was wasn't Raw. When they did the Raw though? They did the Raw at the Georgia Dome where the football team, the Atlanta Falcons, played. It seats about 70,000 people. I think there was probably 30,000 people that night. That was kind of cool. But I talked to Vince that night on Monday Night Raw. That's where I talked to him because Al introduced me to him, and I got a picture with him. And I said, "You don't remember me, but we met in 1984 at the Olympic." And he goes, he didn't remember me. I didn't expect him to. But what am I doing? I'm walking around here. I'm back. Oh man, I'm tripping here. I'm thinking about all this stuff that the experiences. So I was talking to him, and he's just asking me about what it was like in my day. And I said, "Well, you were back then too." So I didn't say that, but I was thinking, well, you were back there too. And he asked me about working. Oh yeah, for his dad. That's what it was. Cause it was his dad that owned the promotion in 1970, 71. And I just says, "Well, I worked for your dad then and just did TV jobs in Philly." And he goes, "Yeah," and blah, blah, blah. But then he goes, "Well, what do you think about this now?" And I go, I said, "Well, this is like being on a movie set," which it was. It was like an actual movie set. They had hairdressers, and they had, masseuses, and they had the gimmick man he did all the gimmicks. He had an actual gimmick guy that goes on the road with him. He did. He had his own little room they'd set up for him, and he'd make gimmicks right on the spot. Gimmick this and that for the boys. And okay, here's what I was getting to. So anyway, I finally go, "Well, listen, there's a guy that I was acquaintance with and did a lot of road trips with in Detroit and then out in Los Angeles, Dr. Jerry Graham. I don't know, remember Dr. Jerry Graham by any chance? Him and Eddie Graham were the champs in New York. But he was a character, to say the least. Just a quick side note, Jerry Graham, when his mother died, he actually went to the funeral parlor and stole her body and he took her out to a lake and propped her up next to him and put a fishing pole in her hand and threw a line in for her because he was a mother's boy and he couldn't get over the fact his mother died. That's Jerry Graham. He was brilliant. He had a brilliant mind, but it's a lot of stories about him. He was a character. So I said to Vince, well, we got a mutual friend and acquaintance, and he goes, the good doctor, Jerry Graham. And he goes, oh, yeah. And Vince told me that he used to, when he was a youngster with his dad, senior, Jerry would take him for rides. Jerry always had a big Cadillac, and he'd take Vince Jr. out for rides in the Caddy, and he would give him a good time, So we had a mutual whatever you would call it, a mutual thing on that with the good doctor, Jerry Graham. But here's another story about Jerry Graham. So I wasn't in this night. I was in a different town, but they told me the next night, you're not going to believe what happened, Mickey. Jerry and whoever he was in the car with, they were coming home from a town in Ohio, and that's on this lake called Lake Erie. I mean, you're near Lake Erie. So anyway, the guys stopped to take a pee, and Jerry rode down. You could hear Jerry. He lost his balance. He was drunk, and he rolled down a hill, and he landed up in Lake Erie. He rolled right into the lake. I mean, that's just the stuff that would happen with him. He was such a character. But I mean, he made a lot of money back in the day. Him and Eddie Graham working for Vince Sr. I mean, they had the belts, and they made a lot of money, and he just pissed it away, basically. He would just piss his... Here's another Jerry Graham story, real quick, if it's okay. So I was in L.A. when I first went out there in 75. I'd been working about 4 months, and lo and behold, here comes Jerry in the dressing room, and I hadn't seen him since the Detroit days, and and he looked really good, because I knew he had an alcohol problem. I go, and Ernie Roth, who was the Grand Wizard, I remember Ernie Roth. He was the manager for Morocco and all the heels. They called him the Grand Wizard. He was a little bitty guy, a really good guy. And he was like babysitting him so he wouldn't. Well, anyway, Vince Sr. wanted to try to make him have a comeback, from his glory days, from the late 50s and early 60s, which was a long time ago. But so Jerry was there. He was not drinking. He was going to Santa Monica Beach every day and swimming in the ocean. And he was, and working every night with, all of us guys. I'd work with him. Morocco worked with him. We all worked with him. Morocco was in LA then too. So then Jerry was going to he stayed in LA for about a month, and then Ernie Roth left, went back to New York, and then Jerry has big night, and I guess they flew him to New York, and it didn't go like it should have gone. It bombed. People didn't care anymore. So that was probably July. So right before Christmas, we're doing TV tapes. We used to do TV tapes in the Olympic on Wednesday nights. And all of a sudden, I'm in the dressing room getting ready, and here comes Jerry, and he's staggering, and he's a mess. He's a mess. And I go, what the heck happened? And he goes, he goes, kid, I've been to hell in a handbag. I've been to hell and back. And he was a mess again. And he would, after that, it didn't work. I don't know how he supported himself, truthfully, because I have no idea. But he did. People would help him. Some of the boys, I guess, would help him, would let him stay there with him. A couple of the guys. But he just, every show, even when WWF came to town in the 84, he would show up. He'd always show up, and he'd be backstage and talking, but he's always messed up. And he finally, I think he died maybe in late 1990s, and he was a vet, so they buried him in a military cemetery, which is a good thing. He was honored because he deserved to be. But anyway, I got talking about Jerry Graham, but he was the golden age of wrestling. He was part of that for sure. He was big time part of that. He was but he just was self-destructive. He was just self-destructive guy. But anyway, you asked me about Vince McMahon. Yeah, we both had a mutual acquaintance, friend, compadre, whatever you want to call it, in Dr. Jerry Graham. Jerry Graham was brilliant, though. He was a hypnotist. He could actually hypnotize people. He was, had a brilliant mind, but I think he was too brilliant for his own good in the wrestling business. And he didn't care. He just live for the moment, I guess. That's what my understanding, or the way I took it. just live for the moment. But Vince, kind of idolized the guy, and he often, when he asked me, well, whatever happened to him and blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, the last time I saw him was when your dad took him to clean him up and try to make a comeback, but it didn't work. And he goes, yeah. So that was my talking to Vince McMahon. So I thought he was cool. I thought he was cool, but I mean, he's had a lot of controversy, obviously, right? Over the last couple of years, big time controversy. So I don't know what's going to happen. I just saw on a video about a month ago, on a high speed chase or something. The cops were, and he rammed somebody. Yeah, you saw that, right? That was crazy.
Yeah, that was.
He could have killed himself, killed the people. He hit a car. It was like, wow. So I don't know what that was all about. But he said he was going to one of his kids' birthday party, a grandkid's birthday party. He was in a hurry or so. But anyway, that was my thing with Vince. Yeah.
And from obviously, I don't know if you know this, but obviously Vince McMahon has stepped away from the WWE and he's not running it anymore.
I knew that. Yeah, I knew that.
So Triple H is now running it. Do you ever wish that Vince McMahon would come back? Who do you think was better at what they were doing? Is Triple H or Vince McMahon?
Wow, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I'm trying to think how long has Triple H been running it and Vince has been gone now?
I would say maybe about 3 years.
I'm trying to think if it was more logical when Vince ran it, or what the hell was the lines? I remember when Vince was running, he was pushing that kid Austin Theory. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I liked Austin Theory.
Huh?
I thought Austin Theory was good.
Yeah, I mean, he's still got a good position there, right? He's got his head shaved or something. I saw him the other night, and he was working with the blonde boxer kid. He was partners with him. Yeah, he's talented. And he's got a good physique. But Vince was really pushing him. I remember that, and that's kind of the last I remember of Vince being there. And then Triple H took over, and who's here's one I don't understand. We've seen a lot of the Usos over the years. I mean, truthfully, I'm kind of tired of them as a fan. I'm kind of tired of seeing the Usos, but I mean, who do you put in that spot though? To the whole with Roman Reigns and the Usos and all that. I mean, it's they're never going to have anything again like Steve Austin and Cactus Jack. They're never going to have nothing like that again, are they? Do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think Vince McMahon had taken, no matter if people liked him or not, he taken wrestling to another stage. Even Vince McMahon Senior took it to a great stage, but Vince really took it. When Bruno Sammartino was coming through, obviously wrestling was getting big, but when Vince got in Hulk Hogan and with Hulkamania, that things just went mad at that point. And Vince McMahon, I think he's irreplaceable. There's nobody who'll ever be like that man as a wrestling company owner.
I think you're right. So, is there talk Vince McMahon's going to come back to the wrestling?
I don't think he ever will, but if he did, it would be great.
Yeah, but he's just got so much controversy now that if those things that he's allegedly did, I mean, that's pretty warped stuff, boy. Pretty slick stuff. So I don't know how that would fly, Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I enjoyed that whole Steve Austin thing. That was fun. Him drove the damn trucks up to the ring, and that was fun. Every Monday night was fun to look forward to that. That was really cool stuff.
Yeah. And with that, the thing was, what Triple H is doing now is it's too commercialized. The promoter show, they're charging so much money for tickets, so much money. And wrestling fans, especially in your day, and even now, a lot of wrestling fans are just the traditional people who want to go and see people fight. That's the way people have always been. People are too posh. If posh people, they don't want to go and see someone fight. And but the poor people are the ones that want to go and see wrestling. So by them going to Saudi Arabia and going to different places, they're losing their fan base. So you can tell Triple H is a lot about the money. But Vince would, if Vince was still running it, I don't think this would all be happening.
I don't either, because I see these things posted on Facebook where they're charging people if they want $9,000 for a meet and greet. And what was the one I saw there? Cody Rhodes, you can ride on his tour bus for almost $10,000, and you get to go to some sites in Las Vegas, and he'll be on the bus with you for. Give me a break. Who's got? I mean, seriously, who's got $10,000 to do that? I mean, who does? I mean, you got to be somebody with a lot of money, and you're probably not even a real fan. You're just trying to. I don't even get that one. Yeah, I don't. And I guess people do it though, don't they? I mean, I don't. Well,
yeah, people are crazy.
But I've also read where some of the like Monday Night Raw shows, like ringside seats are over $1,000 and stuff. If that's true or not, I mean, Jesus Christmas, it's just a house show, you know. It's just a house show, and they're raping people basically. It's yeah. I don't think senior would or junior would stand for that sort of stuff. The greed. That's just greed. In their big shows over in Dubai and everything, well, that ain't going to happen no more. That's a fact, you know. Never see that again.
No, the thing is, and even with the Attitude Era, even when you mentioned The Rock, sorry, not The Rock, Cactus Jack and Steve Austin, a lot of the stuff that they done, yes, there was a lot of story behind it, but and with the cars and everything, but when they got into the ring, Cactus Jack as a wrestler was not amazing. Like when you saw the kicks and the punches, that's really all that happened. Especially with Steve Austin as well, he had the stunner. But that's not taking away anything from these guys. I think the story is what got it there. Nowadays, you just see a lot of guys doing flippy stuff, but it's not real wrestling. You don't have a story. Back in the end days with the Attitude Era, they all had story, and that's what made the Attitude Era successful. Even Andre and Hogan. If you look at WrestleMania 3, the main event, there was not really amazing kind of wrestling. They branded Hulk Hogan that that was his first ever body slam that was the first ever time Andre the Giant got picked up. I don't think that was true. But the way that was hyped and the way the story was of that match, that's why it became so successful. So I believe that Triple H is too much about flippy wrestling nowadays, that it will never be the same that it used to be, and that's why you need to bring in story.
Yeah, I agree. You're right, because there was good storylines, and then Austin could talk so good too, right? He was so good on the mic, and you believed it. You know, you believed he was the rattlesnake. He was just a badass, and it was so believable. And then Cactus, I remember watching it the night Cactus Jack won they gave him the belt that night. It was so cool. I mean, I actually got goosebumps because, you know, he's such an underdog, and he won the belt, and he was running around the ring. That was so cool. You know, it was just neat. But I mean, I don't care who's got the belt now. I really don't mean that. I don't even know who has their belt. Who is their champion? Do you know?
Right now, at the minute, the tag team champions are R-Truth and Damian Priest.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I did see that the other night. Yeah, that was cool. That I really like that because of Truth. Because he's so. I got to drink some water here.
Yeah, no problem.
Because Truth is so cool to watch. You know, he's fun, and they demanded. I know they let him go or something, and they demanded he come back, and they had to rehire him. That was cool.
That was really cool.
Yeah, that was a good story. Yeah, I like that. I like that the other night when they won the belt. But who is their singles champion that's got the belt? I'm not really sure.
Cody Rhodes, unfortunately, it's just getting repetitive and boring now. Cody Rhodes was a great champion. Like he's great on the mic. He's a really, really good champion. But they've kept the belt on him for too long, and then when he loses it, they just let him bring it back again. So that's why I don't really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good worker. Snow trained him. Al was one of his head trainers training Cody Rhodes. I remember that because Al told me when he finally got called up to New York, Cody Rhodes got him a real nice gift certificate for a restaurant or something, and he was real grateful. So he was a good guy. But yeah, that's gotten old. You're right. That's gotten really old. I guess the reason I do watch that now is just to see R-Truth because he's fun. You know, when they put him in these different things, and now he's got the belt. That's kind of cool. I don't know how long that'll last, but it's fun. And when those guys won the belt the other night, I literally think they were happy. Remember, they were both smiling and carrying on. That was real. You know, that wasn't a work. That was real. That was a buzz for them guys for sure. That was cool.
Yeah, so at the minute, professional wrestling probably isn't as good as it was in them days. In my opinion, it wasn't, but it isn't at the minute. But back when you were wrestling, you wrestled bigger names like Andre, I believe. You wrestled Don Morocco, like bigger names, and and sometimes you would put a lot of them guys over. So doing that, obviously, it involves a lot of skill. People don't really understand that people like you who would put a lot of guys over, were the reasons that maybe Andre the Giant would have looked £1 million, $1 million. So so what was kind of the struggles of putting people over, and how, and what do people not why do people not understand how important it actually is?
Yeah, I mean, it's just your job is to make somebody look good. But in the meantime, I'm just still making myself look good too, in that capacity. I would say in my whole career, I probably had a 500 record, like the same amount of wins, the same amount of losses. I would say so in my career. But yeah, like you said, putting somebody over, you know what Roddy Piper used to do when they would do TV tapings? He would give his payoff to the guys that put him over. Did you know that story? You knew that story, right? He would take his payoff and pay the guys that put him over the job.
Oh yeah. I've heard of that.
I don't use that term job guy, but that's a fucked up term. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
Yeah. This enhancement talent or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's what makes people's careers, guys making them look good. That's for sure. Making them look good. Yeah. There was another name I'll tell you who Morocco and I kind of broke in at the same time. He broke in about maybe 6 months before me, but Greg Valentine and I broke in the same time in Detroit. He came from Calgary, then he came to Detroit, and I bet Valentine and I worked 50 or 60 matches. And there was times in Oregon, we were together in a lot of territories. We were together in Oregon, and I was the heel, and he was the baby face. If you can believe that. Valentine was a baby face, and I worked heel. We used to have some brutal matches. I mean, stiff crowbar matches, but that's just the way it was. He potato me, I potato him. I'm trying to get here. I'm holding this camera there. We did a potato match, but we had a lot of fun though, actually. I got off track again, but yeah, making people look good. That was your job, and that's what you did. And that's why I heard that, on the internet, you see, well, he was a jobber and all that. That's like an insult. That's just an insult when people say that, but they're not in the business anyway. They're just looking into the business from the outside. But yeah, did I answer that question all right, or did I get off track again?
Yeah, you answered that well. But I've had nearly 4 matches. I'm having my fourth one coming up soon. I've lost all 3 of my matches, and it's never bothered me once. I love the fact that I'm getting the opportunity to get in the ring and bump and do things. Because the winner does not really matter. It's the meaning of professional wrestling is to put on a show and to give the audience something that they want to see. The reason that you're going out there is for the audience, because the audience are paying to see you. So if you give them a good show, that's all that matters, I think. And people using the term job and jobber and all this, yes, sometimes people are being paid to lose, but you're not really a jobber if you're doing the same thing that every single person on that roster does is paid to wrestle, that every single person is doing. Then you're not really a jobber. You're a wrestler, no matter how many matches you win or how many matches you lose.
Bravo, brother. You're right. That's exactly what it is. We're all workers, right? Working for the same cause for the most part. But the trouble with the pro wrestling, sometimes it can be, and you probably know this already, but you'll learn, it can be a real backstabbing business also. Really, really can, boy. When I was just telling you that story about me and Valentine in Portland, Don Owen, the promoter, would put us together because we always had really stiff, solid matches. So the guy in Portland was a guy named Dutch Savage. He was a really good worker, a really good talker, and he was like trying to homestead in Portland, but he was always suck up to the promotion. And in Portland one night, Saturday night, we were doing television tapings, and me and Valentine went all over the building fighting, and the people were going nuts. They loved the match so much. And Dutch Savage went to Don and said, they can't do that. I'm the top guy here. He was a backstabber. Here's another quick story. Dutch Savage one night. You remember Moondog Lonnie Main? Have you ever heard of Lonnie Main? Okay. So Lonnie was working New York, and he was from Portland, so he came home for about 2 weeks to see his family, and they put him and Dutch together. So after the match, they were in the dressing room. We're waiting to get paid, and all of a sudden, Lonnie gets in front of Dutch and starts slapping him back and forth. And Dutch, Lonnie goes, "You never talk about my wife behind my back. You never say this, you never say that." He got that son of a bitch crying, and Dutch Savage grabbed his bag and ran out of the dressing room. Dutch Savage is like 6'4" and about 260 pounds. And Lonnie was about 5'8" and maybe 280 pounds. But Lonnie would have destroyed him. He destroyed him just slapping him. And Dutch runs out of the dressing room. And what a punk. He was a punk, and he always cried to the promoters when somebody like Valentine and I had a great match going all over the building, and he didn't want that because it took away from him. He thought Portland was his town. That's what I'm talking about, backstabbers. He was a backstabber. He's dead, and God bless him, but he was a creep. That's what I'm saying. You talk about jobbers and this, and I got off track again like I always do. But yeah, you got to be careful. You got to watch your back in pro wrestling for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, have had to learn that when wrestling, but thankfully I'm with the right people. I'm with the right people now. But yeah, you do have to learn that when you do meet backstabbers in this business.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But I think that I don't even. I wouldn't think there'd be any backstabbing in WWF now because everybody's making a lot of money. I wouldn't think that. I think everybody'd be happy. They all got. I know what I was going to tell you back when I started rambling. Demore told me that everybody on TV now, regardless of who you are, you're making at least $300,000 a year. Maybe you knew that anyway. I don't know, but that's what he told me. If you're on TV, you're making a minimum of $300,000. It's like, damn, that's a lot of loot. So parlaying that into the backstabbing. I would think everybody'd be happy in New York. They all got nice contracts, and there'd be no reason for backstabbing. I wouldn't see that happening there, and I wouldn't see that happening in that AEW too, because I know they're making a boatload of money too. So I don't know how prominent that would be in the business anymore as far as that goes. Probably more so on the independent circle, maybe, eh?
Yep, definitely in these, yeah.
So on your promotions that you work for, do you guys draw some nice peak crowds, or do you get like 400 or 500 people, or what do you get? What's a good crowd for you guys?
Yeah, so in Northern Irish wrestling, it's still quite small, but we're growing a good fan base. So we'll have our own dojo shows where we'll have our own training school where we're just host smaller shows in there. That maybe only get maybe about 70 people. But when we do the bigger shows, we do shows in Bangor, where a bigger place in Northern Ireland, where we maybe sell 300, 400 people. It would sell out there. So
that's
that would be really good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and you're getting paid now. Are you getting paid now
for wrestling?
Yes.
I'm not getting paid at the minute, no. But I think there is a few independent wrestlers that would be getting paid.
Yeah, I gotcha. It'll come. You just keep playing your trade. It'll come.
It was never about for me. It was never about that anyway. From when I started, it's just about being in the ring. It's not about the money, especially at this young age as well. You don't really care.
Yeah, but it'll be nice someday, getting some money for it for your trade too. That'll really be worthwhile. That'll be like, damn, finally get a little something to show for it. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a buzz just getting in there, and it's a real trip. It's fun.
Yeah. And speaking of trips and buzzes and things like that, you went to Japan, and I'm really interested in the Japanese style of wrestling. It's a whole different style of things, and even the lifestyles are not even just in wrestling, but in lifestyles. It's just a completely different way of living. So can you tell me a few stories from you being in Japan and the food that you ate, like some memorable stories that people would maybe be watching, thinking to themselves, I can't believe that.
I got some doozies. Okay, I remember. We flew out of Los Angeles on Thanksgiving Day of 1973, and the promotion was called All Japan Wrestling, and the Giant Baba owned it. He was the promoter and the owner. You've heard of Giant Baba, right?
Yeah,
have you?
Yeah, I've heard of him, but I thought didn't Inoki do stuff like that as well?
Wait a minute. Who was the guy again? Who? There was
Antonio
another. Go ahead.
Inoki.
Yeah. He had the other promotion. That was, I think, New Japan. I think. Yeah, they were in opposition to each other. But I went for Baba, and I remember we left on a Thursday, and we got there on a late Friday night because of the time change. And the first night, we got there on a Friday, and we worked on a Saturday. The first night in this building called the Corcoran Hall, I believe it was. And I got to my first match. I worked with a guy named Tommy Jumbo Saruda, who was actually one of the boys, a big time. His career was just starting there, but he had just gotten back as an alternate in the Olympics for Japan. I think this is how the story was. But anyway, before I went over there, Morocco had just gotten back from Japan, and we were together in Oregon. And he told me they told him when he first went that it would be stiff. And he said, but I didn't really see that. And then when I got over there, I didn't work with anybody stiff in the month we were there. And we worked like 4 to 5 times a week. And there was nothing stiff. And me and Suri had a really nice match. Actually, there was a match of him and I on the YouTube out there. I've seen it before. But my problem was I was so nervous for that match because they put us in a semifinal. I was blown up before the match even started, So I was blown up for the whole damn match. And we went I think we went 10, 12, 15 minutes, whatever it was. But so that was no problem. And then, I worked with, here's the funny thing. I worked with these guys, and then I went on this wrestling wrestler base where it's got your whole career on that, or most of your career. And I looked up that. I actually did this the other night, just coincidentally. I was looking up the guys I worked with. So I Googled a lot of them, and I looked up them, and then I worked with the great Kabuki, the guy who later became Kabuki. I worked with a guy named Tiger Mask, and there was one more. There was one more that I worked with that became really famous, and I can't remember their Japanese real names, but that was kind of cool, realizing you work with them guys and you didn't even know it. But anyway, I hung around with a guy from Australia named Johnny Gray. Here's who was on that tour. Fritz von Erich was on it. Bruno was on the tour. Bobby Duncan, a guy named Stan Vachon, myself, Johnny Gray, and Cyclone Negro, who was a famous great wrestler. Cyclone Negro was. So Johnny Gray, Cyclone, and myself, we kind of all hung out together. So maybe 3 weeks into the tour, do you remember King Curtis Ayakawa? Do you remember that? Okay, he had just left the promotion and went back to the States. He had just done a tour. And he left the guy in the office, I can't think of his name, but he left this thing they called the cookie. This is a weird story. It was this big chunk of orange, right? A big chunk of like sand, but it was all together and it was orange. And he gave it to this guy, and we had 2 nights off. I remember we went back to Tokyo, and he gave it to Cyclone. And what it was a thing where you lick it, and it was LSD. Remember, LSD? You go tripping for real? And we did it one night, me and Johnny Gray and Cyclone. And we were in Cyclone's room, and we were so stoned from doing that cookie. And it was just pure LSD. We couldn't function for probably 10 hours. We were up the whole night, and we had the TV on, and we're just trying to figure out, when is this going to end? Because it don't end. LSD just stays in you. You can't come down from it. It's got to come down from you. It's just, but that was a crazy story, something we did. And then I guess the cookie is always left for someone else who does crazy things when it comes into the next time. Cyclone gave it back to the guy in the office, and whoever he gave it to the next tour. But anyway, that's the crazy story there. But yeah, the food. I remember we did a buffet one night in the hotel we were staying in Tokyo, and that's the first time I ever ate carp. Carp, who they say is not a good fish to eat, but I had carp. It was good. We had that sort of thing. And then we stayed in some Japanese hotels where you sleep on the floor, and the bathrooms are like a hole in the floor, and you got to squat down, that sort of thing in the Japanese hotels. And then one night, it was getting to be Christmas now, and it was actually snowing over there. And the boys, we were on some island. That was what it was. Me and Johnny Gray we were on this boat going to one of the islands, and we were in a blizzard, literally a blizzard, and it was like a showboat, if you know what I mean, one of them showboats you see. It was a weird boat, but we went up on top of it. You couldn't see a thing. And we went back inside, and the guy said, we're drifting towards China. It was crazy how they got us out of that mess, but they did, and they got us to wherever we were going, and we were in that little town. And after the show that night, all the boys, the Japanese boys, took us somewhere, and they cooked their traditional meal for us, which was really cool. You know, and we're drinking their sake and their Japanese beer, and got pretty buzzed. But that was a cool experience. I thought the people over there were really nice, really very nice people. They all wore masks at the time, like we had to wear with COVID, but everybody was wearing a mask over there. You see people on the street. That's just what they do over there, I guess, to whatever, I guess germs or whatever the deal was. But yeah, it was a great experience. And then, my favorite place in the whole business of working was in Mobile, and living in Pensacola. That was a blast, and the money was good and lasted a couple years. But then Hawaii was cool, because the funny thing is, I was working. Where the hell was I working? I was working in Portland, and a scout named Matty Suzuki got me booked in. No, he got me booked in Japan. I don't know how I got booked in Hawaii. Somebody got me there. But when I got over there, I had my little, Brett was 2 years old, my son, and then my first wife, and we got our hotel room. And then about a day later, here's Morocco. He just pops up, and his room was right across from mine. So we had a lot of fun there, because he had his car flown over or transported over. So we got to use his car to go around the whole island and everything. And, working in Hawaii, we worked all the islands. We worked every single island. Every week, you would work the big island, either Hilo or the other side of the island. I can't think of it. And then that would be on a Friday night. We worked Maui, and then Saturday we would work the big island and Hilo and the other side of the island, which was cool. Get to And then you're working in Hawaii, getting paid, doing what you love, and you're in Hawaii. It doesn't get much better than that, right? And that territory, when I was over there, it was Morocco, me, Big John Studd, Buddy Rose. Who else? Well, the guy that owned it was named Ed Francis, and his son was Russ Francis, who was a professional football player in the States football. Not like soccer football, but he owned it. And Russ used to fly us to all the islands in his little plane. He had a little prop plane, which was cool. He was a pilot. And then he would wrestle also it was his off season from football. But, and he actually, I think about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, he died in a plane crash, Russ. Crazy, right? Doing what he loves, and he died doing that. But anyway, yeah, that was cool. I got to work there for about a half a year. And then that's where my marriage went to hell in a handbag for real. And, but that was a cool place to work. That and Mobile were my two favorites for sure. And yeah, Morocco and I had a lot of fun in Hawaii. I mean, that's where he ended up living anyway. But did I answer that too? Like I said, I get rambling here, and we go all over the place. Oh no, you asked me about Japan. Yeah, Japan was a great experience, and the food was a different thing. But here's the problem in Japan. It was so expensive. It was so damn expensive to buy. Bruno would get these Kobe steaks, they were called, real expensive steaks, but that was Bruno. Cyclone and Johnny Gray and myself, we would get spaghetti usually. We couldn't afford it. If you want to come back with some money, they were giving us, I was getting $1,000 a week. I don't know what Johnny Gray was getting. He probably told me, but I don't remember. And Cyclone was probably getting, I imagine he was getting $2,500 a week, I would think, because he was their main event guy. But the food was cool. That experience, and the people, just like the average people over there, were very friendly, and it was and here's the thing about the Japanese crowd: they don't get on you like here. They don't boo you or cheer. It's like sometimes quiet. It's weird. It's actually really weird. Back when I was doing the tour, it was weird. I don't know how the crowds are now. Maybe they are vocal, but it was a whole different type of atmosphere with the crowd. They didn't make much noise, which you don't like that, right? You want the crowd to be really crazy, but they weren't. Yeah, that part was weird. I didn't get that, but that's just how they were. And they drew some good crowds too. I mean, not 10 or 12,000 type. They didn't have big venues like that, but they would put 5,000 people in a venue, and they did a lot of the colleges. And out of that deal, I remember we went to one of the colleges working that night, and they had a really nice gym. So I was doing, working out in their gym before the matches, and Bruno was back. Oh, Killer Kowalski was on the tour too of Japan. Because him and Bruno were in the gym working out. It was just the three of us, and I was doing some good bench press, and I was doing reps with like 315, and Bruno thought, hey, that's, Bruno probably did over 500, but he liked that, and he was running a promotion in Pittsburgh at the time. He was kind of not working for New York. He was just running his own promotion and taking a break because Pedro Morales had the belt then. I think it was Pedro. Actually, I'm not sure, but it wasn't Bruno. But anyway, long story short, he booked me in his promotion. He brought me in to Pittsburgh to work for him. The only problem with that is he only ran 2 towns a week. And, the payoff was I was making $200 a week, which even in the 70s, you could live on that. But, I mean, I wanted to make more money. And so I didn't stay there long because of that reason. I was living in Buffalo, New York, and working for him in Pittsburgh. But he was a good, he was a good guy. I like Bruno. I really like Bruno. I got to team up with him one night. We were against Baba and Saruta in the main event. That was really cool. And I did all the bumps. I flew around the ring, and that's what Bruno liked. He liked because I took all them crazy bumps. That's when he said, "You want to come and work in the promotion?" But yeah, Bruno was a good guy. He was a really good man. I mean, he was like a World War II hero and the whole 9 yards. He did everything. He boxed, and he was just one of the boys, There was no ego there, or no, you know what I mean? He's just like you and I talking,
Yeah.
He was like that.
Like
Just
Bruno
go ahead.
Sorry, Bruno was one of the more muscular guys. But I heard interviewed Evan Ginsberg. Obviously Evan, but who obviously helped us get in touch. But Evan also told me, the Bruno was just like a normal guy. Like even though he was just a casual person, even though he was so big, people could kind of look up, people could kind of like relate to him, and a lot of people would have pictures of him in their houses and all. It would be like,
you're right.
Yeah, like Jewish people would kind of have pictures of him in their house, but Jesus Christ and him.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. He was like religion to them. He was just one. That's how we got in touch through Evan Ginsberg.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh wow. Yeah, Evan's a good guy. Eh? He's a good guy. Yeah, I like Evan. He's a really good man. He's for real, for sure. He's a real dude. That's cool. So we all got you and I got a mutual buddy in Evan. That's cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
And as we're kind of coming to the end of the podcast here, I want to thank you very much for coming on. I've got one more question for you before we go here. What advice would you give to young trainee wrestlers starting out in wrestling?
Watch any cards you're on. Watch all the matches. And especially you train with Marty Jones. I mean, have you worked some shows with Marty Jones, or is he just, or how does that work?
So Marty Jones is friends with my coach Nathan. I think he helped train my coach Nathan, so he would come over sometimes and do seminars.
I gotcha. I would, yeah, and watch even old matches from the 60s. Watch that too, because they'll do chain wrestling. Back in they don't know chain wrestling anymore. Go from hold to hold to hold, and Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I would do chain wrestling, so that's kind of my style. I would do a lot of the old Marty Jones stuff. I do a lot of chain wrestling.
I would do that. Yeah, I would just do stuff like that. And then, can you do drop kicks and that stuff?
Yeah. I can't really do them at a very high level, but I can do drop kicks.
Yeah, just when I would teach kids to do, because I could do a good drop kick, I would tell kids just like spring down, and then when you're coming up, throw your hands up in the air, like, spring down and then just up, throw it, and then get parallel and just twist your body. Not everybody can do that, right? But yeah, just keep trying, because drop kicks are cool. If you could throw even in this day and age, if you can throw a cool drop kick, that looks cool. But just keep doing your chain, and just try to always incorporate something new if you can pick it up, something new. And I mean, I don't know, are you left-handed or right-handed?
I'm left-handed.
You're left-handed? We're both left-handed. Yeah. Just try to develop some good punches because, you're always good. And guys throw too many punches now, too, in the business. Too many damn punches, And then another thing that drives me nuts is that stupid kick in the stomach. Always a kick in the stomach, and then the guy, and you can see they're not even touching him, and then they go to I would never do a kick in the stomach. I don't know. I just think that's the dumbest thing, but everybody does it. It's like, you're automatically hurt from a kick in the stomach that doesn't even look like a kick in the. I think that's stupid. But anyway, that's me. But yeah, work on your punches and just even like if you can develop a great arm drag, really a Ricky Steamboat arm drag. If you can do that, that's a cool move. Stuff like that. And you're selling. And then if you're going to be healing, develop a style as a heel, the heel you want to be. If you want to be a wrestling heel, like an Arn Anderson type heel, he would wrestle. He's a great wrestling heel, and Morocco wasn't a wrestling heel. He just was Morocco had his own style actually, but he was fun to watch for sure. But that's all. Just watch matches. I would watch old '60s matches on YouTube just to see that guys like that, like Ricky Steamboat. He was the '70s, not '60s, but I would watch stuff like that and just watch all the things you can and just take it all in and just see what works for you. But really try to develop punches though, for sure. Because if you got a good solid punch, man, or in a jab, if you can do a right-handed jab, I mean, that's not a lot of guys could. You just see even Dusty or Cody Rhodes does that jab. It's bullshit. He stomps his foot. I could literally throw a jab when I was in the air. And I could pop it. I was really good at jabs. I thought I was good, the best. I really did. I thought I was the best fucking jab in the business, bar none. I think I could. A lot of people say, "Well, I never even heard of Mickey Doyle," but I think I had the best right-handed jab of anybody, and that's the only thing I'll blow smoke up my ass about. Nothing else, but my jab was good. But if you can develop something like that stands out, and a good left-handed punch, but not throw 100 of them, just when they count and they mean something, that sort of thing, Stuff like that. But watch matches. That's what I do. Watch matches and go from there. And let's keep in like send me your stuff off air, but send me stuff and we'll keep in touch. Like Facebook. Are we Facebook friends? Are you Facebook? Yeah, friend me and we'll talk. And help you all I can, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. This has been such a good podcast. Thanks very much for coming on.
That was my pleasure. We had a blast, didn't we?
Yep. Thanks so much.
Okay, Keaton. Thank you, brother. All the best.
So what a great podcast we had there with the legendary Irish Mickey Doyle. Coming up on the next Kayfabe with Keaton, I've got a former member of the Nexus, and now he's working on the Indies. He used to be in WWE, former 3-time WWE Tag Team Champion. He's main evented SummerSlam with John Cena and has been at WrestleMania. None other than the legendary PJ Black. This is going to be such a great episode. So that'll be an awesome one too. So what a great episode we had there with the legendary Irish Mickey Doyle. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye for now.